Welcome to the Monday, July 12th Berlin Select Board meeting. We're going to continue to hold our meeting via Zoom, and the information will be available on our webpage, our town's YouTube channel, and along with our minutes will be posted under My Town Government. Let's see. Equal. I think that works. All right, so we will have a call to order at 7:01. And for announcements, we will have the meetings of the Berlin Select Board are generally recorded for transmission on both the Berlin Cable Television Access Channel, YouTube, and/or Zoom via our virtual meeting platform. Your voice, image, notations, alerts, messages, and/or phone number may be recorded. So coming up first is our approval of minutes, June 21st, June 28th, and July 6th.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Bam. Take a vote. Unlike last week, where we didn't have to take a vote because we were all sitting there with each other.
There was one thing, Mary, I think it was, I don't know which one, adopted the earthworks or.
Right, you had adopted or approved as sort of a question of what the right answer word was.
So approved, maybe?
Which
are you talking? What set of minutes are you talking about?
I don't know.
One of the minutes had a yellow section in it that had a question about the wording.
For tonight's approval?
I think
That
so.
was tonight's.
Oh, I think, for June 28th. For June 28th, that would be accept. So accept, I think, is the proper word.
Okay, and not adopt.
No.
Take out adopt.
Okay.
No, am I taking out the word adopt?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
any other catches, comments?
Nope.
All right. So we had a motion and a second. Stone eye.
Keith,
Hawkins,
aye.
aye.
And
I was
Chris.
distracted by my clock.
Oh,
I
see.
noticed.
Chris got hers in before mine.
Oh, okay. All right. So we have an approval on all three meetings. Thank you, minute notes. Thank you so much. All right. Next up, Margaret, any correspondence?
Yes, the board received correspondence from Julie Lee on June 29th. On behalf of the Recreation Committee, she was expressing an interest in repurposing the $30,000 in cultural mitigation funds that Recreation previously had for the wellness trail, but that project did not move forward. The Recreation Committee is interested in refurbishing or upgrading the recreation courts and would like to apply that money toward it.
All right. And I know that you sent Julie all the paperwork to begin the process for capital planning, which
Yes.
I don't know when they'll be meeting. Okay.
I've
Right, 'cause
asked.
Go
I
ahead.
was gonna say, to spend that money is gonna require, again, a vote on town meeting,
yeah.
right? It's still town meeting,
yes.
right?
Yeah, it would just be one of the funding sources for the project. I have asked Capital Planning Committee to look at scheduling a meeting in early August, hopefully.
Was there anything else?
That is the correspondence.
All right. So for our folks in the audience, are there any general public comments that we can entertain at this time? All right. All right. So we're going to have a small change in our agenda. Chief Galvin was unable to make it. So to fill the slot until we get to 7:30, Margaret has graciously offered to talk through her TA report.
Yeah, so the board also has a paper monthly report submitted by Dave Smith for the month of June. The board can certainly review that, but my report. Okay. Where to begin? We've received preliminary cherry sheet numbers that have come out of the conference committee. We're pretty much in line with FY21s. We're seeing a bit of an increase in our unrestricted general government aid at this point, and that seems to be sticking. So the governor's proposal was lower, and as it's moved through the House and Senate and Conference Committee, it's remained at about $7,500 higher than last year. Assessments are up slightly by $1,000. We have received our first disbursement of ARPA. That's the American Rescue Plan Act funding. We've received a disbursement of $169,563.06. We are vetting a huge pile of guidance documents from the US Treasury and from the state on use of those funds. And I will bring, along with June, we'll bring an outline to the board for appropriate uses of those funds. Clearly, we're not going to want to apply any one-time funds to recurring expenses, but I think there might be some things that would be of interest to the town to use the funds on. I am going to be away out of state next Sunday through Thursday, and we'll have limited cell service and no Wi-Fi. And according to the act, I need the board's approval to ask that June hold down the fort for me during those 4 days and communicate any urgent policy or community-wide matters to the board through PEG or a board designee. I've also asked the chiefs to directly communicate any urgent public safety concerns to the board directly. So I'm seeking the board's approval on this.
Do we need a motion on that?
So moved.
Or just, yes, so second.
All right. So Margaret's going on vacation. Motion in a second. Let's have a vote. Stone, no. No, Stone, aye.
Hawkins, aye.
Aye.
Okay.
All right. Off you go, Margaret. Have a great time.
All right, so under procurement, a new loader has been purchased with the funds that were appropriated by town meeting. We've been notified that one of the older loaders, the 2008, needs a new transmission at a very large cost of about $38,000. The older loader's transmission works, but that loader is a 2002. But two loaders are needed, especially during winter months. So I'm looking into the resale value of one or of at least one of those old loaders to try to recoup some of the funding so we can get a working loader here. The Finance Committee is going to be discussing this on Wednesday night. I don't think anyone wants to sink $38,000 into an old loader. So we have to look at options for getting a second and keeping a second working loader. I also have concerns, of course, with replacement schedules. And when you buy two new loaders at the same time, you're looking at the same replacement schedule down the road, which creates some financial burden often. So the last week, John Aney of the Conservation Commission, he was still on the Concom at that point, Abutter Sue Terrian, Police Chief Galvin, resident Julie Malik, and I met at the parking area on Linden Street to actually measure out some distances and stake the area of that parking area that's used for the conservation access through the Terrian's property. So we all agreed on the location of the stakes. John placed the stakes. We all agreed on the location. I took photos of the stakes and where they were in proximity to the stone wall and to the tree and to some ledge. We looked at the possibility of a new parking area or entrance, I'm sorry, farther away from the blind corner to improve visibility and public safety. It does look like it would be possible to remove a portion of stone wall and replace that stone wall possibly in the current entrance area to block that off completely. So I've asked the planning board what steps are needed to proceed toward a hearing. And once there's approval, we could then start looking at some sort of collaboration between highway and conservation, I would hope, as has been done at that parking area in the past. Now, the Candle Mass LLC, the proposed marijuana cultivation and manufacturing facility, is going to be doing a virtual community outreach meeting, which has been rescheduled. So the new meeting date is Wednesday, July 28th at 6:00 PM. Public notice has been posted. Mary, have you received a copy of the rescheduled date yet? Because if you haven't, I will get it to you.
No, I do need that.
Okay. So we are going to be doing a technology review meeting on the 26th at 1:00 to make sure that their virtual setup is going to be sufficient for the outreach meeting. And I think that pretty much wraps up the highlights. I'll discuss the highway transition under that agenda item.
Does anyone have any questions for Margaret?
Margaret, you talked about needing an extension of the Bullard House weatherization.
Yes, I have not received any word yet from Historical if we need to agree to an extension on that project, but at the same time, I don't have word that the project has begun yet, so I hope to talk with, Elaine has been in communication with Squaw
Okay.
Hollow, so I'll check with her.
And then potentially getting, this is my ignorance, the next steps if they wanted to start looking for bids to start the sill work. Because it looked like there was still enough money left in the fund they have for sill work.
Mhm.
And I don't think we have to wait for weatherization to be done to start the process of getting bids.
No, no, we don't. We could actually seek bids to begin the sill work and see what they come in at. To use the remaining, reuse the remaining funds for that, we'd need the select board's approval. So any use of those funds requires select board approval. So I think we can do the invitation for bids, but I think I'd want to bring it to the select board for final approval on use of those funds.
And Historic has a meeting next week, right?
They have a meeting, yes, next week on the 20th. And yeah, they have a meeting next week on the 20th.
All right, and just to let folks know, so the monthly department heads, next time we meet, the 26th, we'll have Chief Gavin and Chief Clark give their reports back to back. All right, Chris, any questions?
No, I think I'm good.
All right, so we still have time. It's only 7:13. Our next hearing isn't until 7:30. So let's scoot down a little bit on the agenda. Margaret, do you want to pop down to new business? There's 4 items.
Yeah, sure.
So the first one is the fiscal year 2021 end of year transfers.
Yeah. So 2 of these, the board needs to formally act on. The other one, the reserve fund transfer, is for the board's information. It's going to be presented to the finance committee. So the first one is a request for a contingency line item transfer, FY21. It's a whopping $16.89 of the first quarter submission that we sent to FEMA and Administration and Finance in Boston. Only $16.89 was deemed an ineligible expense. This was actually for label tape to put labels in the COA van to mark social distance spacing and some equipment. Why they denied it, I don't know, but they got back to us at the very end of the fiscal year. So we thought that June and I have signed off. And we believe that it's in the town's best interest to approve this contingency line item transfer and encumber the remaining FY21 contingency line funds that were dedicated for COVID expenses. Because again, this report only covers until September of 2020. So there's still a whole 3/4 of a year for FY21 that the state hasn't even reviewed yet. So we don't know what's to come. So I recommend the board's approval of this one. And then the other one is an appropriation, an appropriation transfer for the end of the fiscal year. This is from police wages, full-time wages, to the sick pay account, and this is for the union sick pay buyback. It was short $684. So we recommend that that also be approved. And then finally, there is a request for a reserve fund transfer that's going to be headed to the Finance Committee. This was for an invoice that arrived after our workers' comp audit. It was sent electronically in the height of COVID, and I will admit, it came to me directly with copies to no one else, and I missed it. So that's why we are, regardless, we would have needed the reserve fund transfer, but this is why the timing is such as it is right now at the end of the year. So this, we do need $328 in order to close out that line. And that's it.
So Margaret, do you want a motion on all three, or do you want them independently?
On the two, well, however the board would like to do it,
I'll make a motion to approve the first two that Margaret recommended.
So the 1689 and the 684?
yes.
Okay.
I'll second, although I have a question.
Okay.
The internal for the 684, it shows that the balance in police wages full-time is 130,000. We're at the end of the year and there's still 130,000 in that fund.
June. Mary, can you promote June to speak to that one?
No,
June?
yeah, there is still 130 in there. I know that the chief, some of it had to do with training, and I believe it also had to be that we were short some full-time people for a short period of time, which caused us to have a large overage. Normally, that is not a normal thing. It's just that this year where he did have nobody for a short period of time, that's what it was. It's pretty much one person's full salary for the year, so.
There was one extended vacancy that's been filled most recently by Molly Plant, who the
Yeah.
board met not too long ago. So
I was gonna ask for an update on her at when he presented today, but, okay, thank you.
All right, so any other questions? All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the $16.89 and the $684 Stone Eye.
Hawkins, aye.
Keith, aye.
There you go.
thank
All right,
you.
and then we have one more discussion on the workman's comp audit for $328.
Thought that didn't require us. I thought that was FinCom only for our,
Is it FinCom only, Margaret?
That's FinCom only, but I wanted to share it for the board's information.
I appreciate that. Again, I remember a time when FinCom and Select Board had to do all of these jointly. So would love to go back to that someday.
All right, still have time. So let's go. Draft town administrator annual evaluation process. All right.
Is
No,
to
it's in-
prescribe a timeline and format for the administrator's evaluation process. I have no concerns of the way it's been done
Yeah.
to date, but this would memorialize the annual evaluation process moving forward. And this is presented to the board tonight as a draft for your review. No need to feel obligated to act on it. You can certainly review it. And we'd bring it back later after any comments are received from the board.
So Chris, I guess I would look to you for a little bit of guidance since you were the one who did Margaret's last two on these. So if there's anything that you can share on how we can do differently.
On the evaluation itself, or this is just the process?
This is the process, so I just want to make sure as you were going through them prior, was there anything that we left out, need to change?
No, it's really just to make sure that we sort of follow the timeline so we don't fall behind.
Mhm.
And, when the three of us are gone, someone else will know what to do.
We're not
So-
going anywhere.
And I did go over it with Margaret to make sure that it was, how she remembered it too.
Okay.
So, I don't think
Provides,
either
it
of us.
provides consistency, and I
Mhm.
think that's important.
Right.
So do we want to look at comments back by our next meeting, 2 weeks from now?
Whatever you
Yes.
want to do.
Please.
Yeah, so my only comment really was about the goals and objectives. I think doing that in June makes more sense than May. You're gonna have town meeting and town elections. In theory, there could be a brand new select board meeting. I don't know if a brand new select board member should be doing goals and objectives at their first meeting.
I mean, that's a good point.
And
Yeah.
we don't have to decide right now. That's just,
Yeah,
Mhm.
the only thing in the entire document that stood out to me as something that might be worthy of changing is when we do goals and objectives.
you might even want to just push everything back a couple of weeks then. Push it earlier. So that you're doing the goals and objectives before the election. If that's what you
No,
want.
I want to do the other direction because I don't want to do goals and objectives with the town administrator or the select board and then have a new person show up, have a third of the board change over and suddenly they had no input into goals and objectives. I'd rather do the town
Oh, okay.
administrator, do the annual meeting, the annual election, give the new person at least a week or two to figure out, what's up and down, and then get into goals and objectives in June.
Well, I mean, originally I was thinking like the end of May. But whatever pleases you,
Right, yeah,
Or
so if we can
objection.
have comments back by our next meeting, the 26th, that would be great. And then we can discuss and make a vote.
Make,
Okay.
if you're gonna send them to Margaret, then maybe she can let me know what they are.
All right,
Okay.
awesome. All right, so next up are draft updates to select board agenda and procedures.
This was far more extensive than I imagined it was going to be, and it does not take into account COVID in any way, shape, or form, or fully virtual meetings. All this does is go over how the agenda is set, what's included in each, under each agenda category, changes the name of select board throughout, goes over deadlines for submission of agenda materials. So I've given the board the current agenda procedures that were adopted back in September of 2019, a red line of the draft, and then a clean PDF of the draft. So I would appreciate you looking through these as well and send any comments to me in the next 2 weeks.
So have it ready for our July 26th meeting as well.
July 26th,
Cool.
yeah.
All right.
Unless you feel it's too much for 2 weeks.
No.
Too much
Easy.
in 2 weeks.
Easy peasy. And then our last new business is the draft mobile food vendor policy and
Yeah.
procedures.
And this was late. I'd been working on it for a while. This is one of those policies and procedures that's going to need to be vetted by multiple departments, boards, and committees. And the reason is because the Board of Health would be involved in issuing permits here, the Select Board would be, Fire Department, police would need to review. So this is a very, very, very first draft that I'd like to circulate to all the stakeholders and get everyone's comments before we finalize these and put an application, draft an application. So this might be a little more than.
Do most
2
towns
weeks.
already have such a process for this? I
They
know you
do.
included a couple of them.
They do, yeah. And
Yes.
I've looked at other towns. They vary widely, and
They do. Do
lot
we
of
have a
them-
lot of food trucks that are causing problems that we need something like this?
we don't currently. We wouldn't want to be in a position where we
Something
decide to have
happens. Yeah.
a food truck parade and we're not prepared.
You know that West Boylston just went through the process, and in their little common at the intersections of like 12 and whatever, 13, they have food trucks, I think, every week. Okay. All right, so Margaret, are you gonna send this around to everybody to have comments back to you?
I'd like to do that because I think we need feedback from all the reviewers and permit issuers.
And do you have a date-ish to get everybody's input back?
Yeah, I think a month from now. So the first meeting in August maybe would be a good time. That should give everyone plenty of time just to look it over and provide their comments.
So that would be August 9th.
Okay.
Okay.
Maybe we should tell them the
Tell them
20th.
it's due, tell them it's due the week before.
Okay.
Right.
So it needs to be ready for discussion on the 9th. And again, absence of feedback means acceptance, or at least it does to me. Okay.
Okay. All right,
All
I'll
right.
circulate that.
Thank you, madam. All right. We have 4 minutes before our 7:30 hearing. Does anybody want to go quick on liaison updates?
I can.
Okay.
I attended the Council on Aging meeting where Victoria gave just a few updates because they did not have a quorum. And so I did ask Council on Aging to send something to you, Peg, on their group if they were interested for the item.
Yep.
And presently, they do not have any vacancies.
Good.
So I just threw it out there, you
Yep.
know.
Okay.
And that's about it.
Scott, do you have any?
No,
All right.
Peg, would you like me to give a quick update on highway operations, highway transition?
Sure.
Okay. So former highway superintendent Dave Smith left the town's employment by resignation, retirement on July 9th. There's no temporary contract in place for Dave to fill in on a part-time basis. So what we've done is Jim Spinney, who is the highway foreman, will receive an extra step in pay to oversee the operations of the department during this transition. He will be assisted by Fred Cummings. So when Jim is unavailable, when he's away, Fred Cummings will be assisting in that capacity in overseeing the highway department's operations. During the transition, the highway department will be short-staffed. And this transition, it was hoped it would only be a few weeks, but the candidate the board interviewed on Tuesday for the position withdrew. I received that notice today. So we are going to go back. I'm hopefully going to reconvene the preliminary interview panel to have a follow-up discussion on next steps. But anyway, again, the highway department is going to be short-staffed. Any special project requests from town departments, boards, and committees for non-urgent projects may have to be delayed so we can assure that the crew is able to stay on their highest priority responsibilities. We're going to also hopefully post for a seasonal summer laborer position, and I hope that happens in the very near future. The board and personnel committee approved a job description for that position not too long ago, but a job ad was never brought forward for posting. So I'm going to bring that to the personnel committee on Wednesday night. So I just want to thank everyone for their patience as we try to work through this process. And Mary will post something on our website providing the status of the transition.
Perfect. Thank you, Margaret. And look at that. You bring us right to 7:30. So at 7:30, we have a joint meeting with the Board of Health for the Rcap Solutions Private Well Program. So I'm thinking, let's see, yep, Bill.
Oh, I see Jim Starbird is our first presenter. Mary Jude is here.
Okay.
Olive All of our board. Got at least 2 members of Board of Health here. I think.
Yep, Sue, Paul.
Okay.
So Paul, Jim, Mary Jude, Sue, if you want to unmute.
Hi,
Hi.
Jim.
Hi, good
Hi, Mary Jude. Nice to see you both.
evening. Thank you for having me.
So Margaret, should we have probably Mary Jude or Jim give an overview of what the Rcap Solutions Private Well Program is?
Yeah, I think Jim would be the person to do that. The 2 agencies are working collaboratively, but Jim can provide more detail on the testing program that they're conducting first, and then Mary Jude can talk later about PFAS.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you for having me. I'm Jim Staub, the Massachusetts State Lead, and I'm here to talk about the program that we have that's funded by the Health Foundation of Central Massachusetts. We're in year 2 of a 5-year grant. This year we're looking at 6 specific communities. At Berlin is one of them, and we'll be looking to do 40 well samples for 13 different contaminants, or naturally occurring mostly, that the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection and Mass Associated Boards of Health recommend that homeowners test for in the Commonwealth. So we'll be looking to do 40 within the town of Berlin, as well as a well assessment. We have a well assessment program that was instituted probably about 5 to 7 years ago under our EPA funding. And it's really like a holistic look at the well, septic areas around it, and give the homeowner advice on how to make things a little bit better to hopefully keep contamination away from the well and maintenance of the well. Look at their treatment system, talk about different things that they should do for testing looking in the future. And in the end, we send the homeowner a full report with the testing results, with that well assessment. And then if we do find anything that's of an issue, we send them brochures and other kind of educational advice on how to correct the issues, how to put treatment in. We don't recommend who to go with, but we give them advice on what sort of treatment they should be looking to, and have them contact a well professional, as well as any well and septic records we might find, because we do a records check before meeting with the homeowner to try to get some background information on it. So that's really, I'm going to see if there's any questions. What really from the town we'd really like to is have your help, getting the word out when the time gets going. Usually around August, we're looking to do the testing in September or October. And also, like I mentioned, we'd be doing a lot of records checking. So, about 40 different wells, we'll be looking for well and septic records. So usually have to coordinate with the Board of Health on how to do that. But other than that, we'd be sending, at the end, we'd come back to the Board of Health and the selectmen if they'd like to show you what we found. We're not going to be disclosing individual addresses, if you will, but as a town as a whole, what we're finding, what kind of, contaminants we're finding, what kind of treatment that your homeowners might have out there that's, treating those issues, and, hopefully give you a better understanding of the water quality in the town. In the long run of this, the 5-year grant is really to standardize private well regulations and private wells in the Commonwealth. Right now, it's one of those regulations that there is no statewide private well regulation. It's, each and every Board of Health has their own regulations and enforces them themselves. And we feel that it should be kind of standardized like any other public health code, like Title V, the food code, that there should be a minimum standard that the boards of health that would enforce, but then the Board of Health can be more stringent or add to it as the needs of their community might come. So I think that's everything I wanted to discuss. I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.
Paul has a question.
I do. What's the, address the selection process of whose wells get tested?
First come, first serve right now. Right now we have, we get your interest. There is a pre-questionnaire that we have the homeowners fill out. So we'd be working with them. And once they make it through that, they'd come to me and we'd set up the time. So there's a screening process, but it's not really more of a screening. It's more of a questionnaire process, I should say. But it's, if the homeowner partakes in all that, then they'd come to me and we'd, schedule the appointment. So there's no, selection of where we want to do them and all that. We're just trying to get willing homeowners that are, want to learn about their well.
Okay, a follow-up question to that is, I can see some people being hesitant to having their well tested in fear that they're going to have to spend $5,000 or $10,000 on a new well. And that's particularly applicable to, we have a number of shallow wells in town. And how do you folks address that? Or how have you addressed it in the past in other communities?
Well, the first thing is this is an educational program, and we're going to give advice. Whether they take that advice is totally up to them. We would try to give, point them to, if they need financial resources, try to, point them to the known financial resources that we have. Well, not we have, but we know about. I will say there is not too many of those. It's much more on the septic end than there is in the private well end, which I think has to do a lot with the lack of regulation statewide. The Title V kind of came with a lot of caveats of homeowner assistance, if you will. But, we try to get the word out to the homeowner. This is strictly educational. And like I said, there's not going to be a report given back to the town of, what we found out there, who has a bad well and all that. But shallow wells, dug wells, drilled wells that are still in the pit of the formerly dug well is a very common thing that we do.
Bless you.
So you deal just directly with the property owner. The Board of Health gets no information back from you folks unless the property owner so chooses. Is that accurate?
Correct. We give generalization. After the 40 samples are done, we'll give a report to the town. Here's the 40 samples. How many had a problem, how many had iron and manganese, how many had bacteria, but we're not specifically, because this is not public funding. So we're going to keep it as educational in between the homeowner and ourselves, if you will.
Do you identify the area of town where problems occur or not? Is that off the table as well?
No, we could do that. The big thing is just we don't want to identify the participating homeowner and put a permanent record. Because if we give it to the Board of Health and it goes in the file, it's now public record.
Correct.
So,
okay.
So Margaret, would you recommend, if this is going to go live September-ish, would you recommend probably sometime at one of our August meetings that we come back together with the Board of Health and see how we can jointly work together to get the message out to the town, or do we need to go earlier?
You could certainly do that, but I wouldn't delay. I'd be getting the notice out now. As Jim said, it's first come, first serve. This is limited to only 40
Yep.
slots in the town. They have provided a QR code that folks can scan. Jim, is there another way that residents can contact you to do this, or is it just the QR code?
QR code, and we do have a phone number for Lily.
Okay.
It's on my on the website there.
Yeah, and
Doing
it's on
everything electronically now. We used to have paper flyers before the pandemic.
Yeah, okay, so we actually have the brochure that you had sent out, and it does show Lily's telephone number.
Sure,
So
you can
folks
call her
could
as well.
either, yep, so folks could either call or use the QR code. So yeah, Peg, that, to answer your question, I think that we should be getting the word out soon
No? Okay.
about this, yes. Unless anybody feels, Board of Health or the board members feel differently.
Well, if Recap has done this before, do they have any information that would assist us in getting the word out? Any preconceived flyers, any kind of information that would assist the town in getting this program out into the public purview?
This year really has been electronic means, the town sending out the electronic flyer that we have, as well as we have a communications department that does a lot of the social media aspects of it, the town Facebook pages, if you will, any known emails, addresses we have in our data set. So that's really the way we've been doing it. Back in the day, we used to, post notices in town halls, but I really hasn't been doing that this year, if you will.
You realize that in small towns, there's still a lot of back in the day people.
Mhm.
We can post, we have a way to post paper notices around town, so we'll work on that.
It's one of
too.
my pet peeves in this community.
All right. Sue, do
Thank
you
you.
have any questions from the Board of Health side?
I do. What's involved for the homeowner? Do they have to dig up their well? So take the well cap off? What would the homeowner have to do?
Homeowner really just has to invite us actually to the door. We have the homeowner do the sampling at this point. We bring the bottles to them and have them instruct them how to do the sample. We just look at what the well is on site. We don't open the cap. We're not looking to, look inside the well or go in there, and then we'd have to, bleach the well and all that. We look at the actual cap around the surrounding area around it. Any areas of contamination around that. They have backflow preventers on any outside faucets. Look at their septic area, land uses around their wells. I've been running into a few, agricultural areas that, uses around the wells that aren't the best. But issues like that, more like the surface area and means of contamination of the well, and not the actual inside of the well. We really look for the well log and any kind of records we can get to try to find out what's going on inside.
So we'd have to find the wellhead, right?
That's sometimes an issue too. I mean, we've
Yep.
a couple of them. We've been out there with a metal detector, and got a
I was
few,
gonna
maybe
say,
here,
or
maybe
you
there.
have to know where it is.
I know about where it is. I just haven't seen it for a while.
Right.
A lot of pine needles out there.
So, I mean, but Margaret, that brings up a good point. I mean, is there anything that the assessors can share for maps of people's properties? If you didn't live in the property for, 40 years, 40 plus years, and you might kind of sort of know, but not really. Is there anything that the town can support for help in finding your well?
Well, the assessor's office wouldn't have those maps.
Okay.
I think the Board of Health records, if any, should show that. Is that right, Bill? Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say that when people ask for research, I check the town office, but also our office in Air. So we look for as-bills, things like that.
We have 17 minutes before our next hearing, and there's quite a few people in the audience, so I don't know if we can open it up briefly to see if any of those folks have questions to ask of Bill or Jim, Paul or Sue. All right, not seeing any. So then if you have Margaret, if we have all the information, do we want to drop on our agenda next week? The best way, or next week, sorry, 2 weeks, the best way to get this information out so we can start circulating it?
Well, I think that we could probably give an update as to where we've posted it, and we
Okay.
can announce it again. And
Right, don't we have a policies, maybe not the right word, but how to get the word out, sort of policy, places
Yeah.
where we flyer things, places
Yep.
where we electronically
Yep.
post it, places where we, like
Yep.
the Powder House News, yeah. So I mean, I think we're fine with just starting that process and getting out there any way we can.
This is a good start right here.
Absolutely.
there is, it's a good opportunity for homeowners.
Mhm. Jim, is there any opportunity to go beyond the 40? Or, if someone didn't get on the list but has a really big concern about their well, reach out to you, reach out to somebody else, to have wells tested?
I believe that the 40 on this funding would be as much as we can do.
Okay.
There is a small pool of funding. We have an EPA, I believe like 7 tests for our whole region, which is 7 states. So if we know of a known problem, we're trying to be really hesitant to use that. The last time we used one of those was in Western Mass. Someone who called us, the pediatrician, had asked that their water be tested because the child had high copper. and they were on a private well. So it's kind of the last time we used that. So if a
Okay.
homeowner called us with a very unique situation, you
Mhm.
know, a health issue, health concern, an unknown bad well, you know, we'd be able to, on a very limited basis, but it's not something we'd be able to do a lot of. Like this
Okay.
is more of you know, a broad stroke and see what's out there, if you will. And you know, sometimes we're seeing good things and sometimes we're seeing bad things in the other towns that we've been. So, but we are, you know, no matter where we're going, we're finding percentage wise, you know, a number of issues to educate the homeowner on.
Okay. I appreciate that. So seeing as there are no other questions, I know that our next appointment is at 8 o'clock. And Mary Jude is here. Do we go into that, Margaret, or do we
Yes,
try to
you
fill?
certainly can do that because again, this, RCAP and DEP are working collaboratively on their respective programs, so.
All right, Mary Jude, over to you.
Sorry, I have my slideshow up on the side and my cursor gets a little wonky. Is someone there able to do the slides or should I show? Okay, so
Mary will do.
I'm Mary Jude Pigsley. I'm the Regional Director of the Massdp office in Worcester, the Central Region. One of my colleagues, Mark Baldy, was going to join me tonight. He had a conflict, so it's just me. And just want to let you know, we have 77 cities and towns in the Central Region. We go from New Hampshire to Rhode Island and Connecticut. So we have big cities, we have small towns. And what Margaret had asked me to do, I've been talking to Margaret off and on about this PFAS contamination that you've probably heard about. You may have read about it in the newspaper, seen any of the movies that have been out about it. This is a very brief overview of what PFAS is and why Massdp regulates it, how Massdp regulates it, and then a special program we have just for private well owners that is kind of different from what Rcap is doing. Jim and I are often at the same meetings talking about slightly different things. So on the next slide, one of the important things to keep in mind is where does your water come from? And Massdp regulates public water supply wells. Public water supply wells is a well that serves 25 or more people, regardless of who owns it. So you can have a private building, you know, a restaurant, a condominium. It's a public water supply well. Private well serves fewer than 25 people. So you can have a publicly owned building like a town hall that is actually a private well because there aren't 25 people who work there. Massdp regulates public water supply wells. Massdp does not regulate private wells, which is where Rcap comes in to help communities, especially small towns, come up with ways that their Board of Health could regulate private wells. It's a really important area to add that layer of public health protection, where if you get your water from a public supply, you have that. And if you don't, you as the homeowner are responsible for your own public health and your own treatment. So it's a really, I really like the program. I'm kind of jealous of the money that they got to do this, but then we ended up getting money specifically for PFAS. So it's all good. The next slide. So what are PFAS? PFAS are per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. It's a family of thousands of man-made chemicals. Most people who've heard about PFAS know them as Teflon. They are called forever chemicals because they don't degrade, they don't break down. The thing that makes them so useful from industrial and other applications is what makes them very persistent in the environment. They are heat resistant, stain resistant. Basically, they're long chains of carbons and fluorine. There's a little picture of one of the molecules up there. And the longer the chain of the carbons and fluorines, the more toxic the chemicals are. And as I said, there are thousands of them. And Massdp is regulating these chemicals, some of them, because some of them are very toxic. They have a long half-life in your body, and they have developmental risks with a very short period of exposure. A lot of times people think about drinking water standards and they're developed over a lifetime exposure for these PFAS chemicals. For certain sensitive subpopulations, which I'll get into, the exposure period can be significantly shorter. The next slide. So where you find PFAS, you find PFAS everywhere. Anything that's stain resistant, water repellent. I'm not allowed to use trade names anymore, but you know what your stain resistant clothing is and what you put on your couches and your rugs that are waterproofing. Microwave popcorn bags, certain kinds of dental floss, hairsprays, all kinds of different manufacturing processes. Anything that makes the stuff that's water resistant, like upholstery manufacturers, have been sources of PFAS contamination in groundwater. And certain kinds of firefighting foam, aqueous film forming foam. It's a specialized foam that's mainly used for fighting like petroleum fires, and it's found a lot around airports, Army bases, Air Force bases, places that have had airfields. So with all of this stuff, you can see that my slide says most Americans are exposed through it. Most of the people in the world, I've seen statistics, 98 and 99% of people in the world have some level of PFAS in their blood. So it's not just the drinking water. There are these other uses, but Massdp's concern is exposure through drinking water. So the next slide. So why Massdp decided to regulate, is that the next one? I think there's one in between, no? Yeah. So we decided to regulate because of those sensitive groups. The sensitive subpopulation is pregnant women, nursing mothers, and infants, and also people with immune compromised conditions. The scenario for the risky exposure is if you drink the water or cook with the water, and that means food that absorbs water, not everything. Pasta, rice, things that when you cook them in water, they absorb that water. And it's in a residential setting. So a sensitive group, what's the concentration of the PFAS and what's the frequency of the exposure to the PFAS? So if you're not in a sensitive group, there's relatively less concern. If you're not living where you drink the water, if it's a workplace or a restaurant or a coffee shop, that's a level of less concern. And using the water for other uses like bathing, you can wash your vegetables, you can brush your teeth. So those are relatively less concern than in a residential setting with a member of a sensitive subgroup. If you're concerned about PFAS and you want it to reduce your exposure, you can drink and cook with bottled water. The Department of Public Health has tested various bottled water. Some of the manufacturers, or whatever you call them, producers of bottled water, have provided the information voluntarily to us. We have the information about bottled water on our website. It's also available through the DPH website. And there are home treatment systems. There aren't any that are certified to get to the level that Massdp is regulating to. The federal government, EPA, doesn't have a standard, but they have a health advisory, and it's just for 2 of the PFAS chemical, 2 of the thousands. And you'll see a slide in a second. Massdp is regulating 6 of them combined. So you can buy treatment systems, but they don't treat down to 20 parts per trillion for 6, which is what our standard is. The way we got here was through an EPA rule for public water systems. Every 5 years or so, EPA says we should go and look at things that we don't regulate and figure out if we should regulate. And that's why the rule is called the Unregulated Contaminant Monitoring Rule. And it only applies to water systems with over 10,000 customers. But there were some in the Commonwealth who participated in the UCMR. And the information was that we were finding PFAS everywhere. And our scientists in our Office of Research and Standard, toxicologists, risk assessors have been following all the developments around the country, around the world with toxicity information. And we proposed a rule. The rule became effective in October. That actually sets 2 different standards. It's the same number, and it's important here to show you both boxes because one is for public water supplies, which is 20 parts per trillion, and one is the cleanup standard that would be used for groundwater that is or could be used as drinking water under our 21E program, which is 20 parts per trillion. It's the same number because it's the same process. You're drinking the water. The regulation is different because we regulate public water supplies. They can't serve the water if it's more than 20. But also if you have contamination in the ground, we regulate under our cleanup program that it has to be below 20 parts per trillion. It's complicated. I should have said that at the beginning, and I wanted to kind of talk fast to get through the slides, and I know people may have questions. So the next slide. So the maximum contaminant level is 20 parts per trillion for 6 PFAS compounds combined. It became effective in October, and the number is very low. And we hear criticism from people saying it's too low, we should go with the EPA number. The number that we came up with is based on health information. It's protective of those sensitive groups, and it does account for exposure to more than just drinking water. So we're not just looking at the water, we're looking at the dental floss and the exposure to consumer products and coming up with that health-based number. So next slide. So what we're doing is a lot of things. We developed the drinking water and cleanup standards, so check the box on that. We've done a lot of technical assistance with public water suppliers. We're doing education, outreach, things like this meeting, following all the science. We did a firefighting foam take back program. Any fire department in the state was eligible to have us come and take any of the PFAS containing foam that they have. And we sent it away to be incinerated. The only way you can destroy it is incineration at really high temperatures. So we have offered that. We are working to identify sources of contamination when we find it in public water supplies. We don't really have a program anymore. I don't know if people know about the 21E cleanup program, but it's a privatized program where if you have a site that needs to be cleaned up, you hire a licensed site professional, and that person works to figure out what you need to do to get your site to a condition of no significant risk. For public water systems, I mean, they didn't cause the problem, and here they are having to spend literally millions and sometimes tens of millions of dollars to treat the water so that it's fit and pure for consumption. So we are spending a lot of time doing source discovery. We're trying to do source discovery in these communities that have PFAS contamination. And then the last one is where we overlap with Jim a little bit, where we did get some money to do sampling and analysis for both public water systems and private wells. So that's the part that people have been waiting to hear about. So the next slide. So all the public water systems have to test for the first year, it's quarterly, 4 times. The largest systems started in January. The smallest systems will be starting in October. There are only 14 public water systems in Berlin, and 7 of those are on the October schedule. The other 7 are not even part of the quarterly testing. They're basically like a coffee shop somewhere. It's not the same 25 people. It's 25 people, but not the same ones. They don't have to sample until October of next year. So there's not a huge amount of public water customers, as you know, in Berlin, but the money for the free sampling is available to all 14 of those systems. So condominium associations, you are eligible for this sampling, and we can get that sampling done for you. We use UMass as our contractor. We'll work with you, with your certified operator to get the free testing done for you now or in October, whenever you want to do it. We also have grants to the public water systems for design and construction and treatment. And you can see $20 million. It sounds like a lot of money. It's really not a lot of money when you look at the cost of building a treatment plant. Next slide. So we also have money to do private well testing. So we don't regulate the private wells, and there are no PFAS testing requirements, but in an effort to figure out where is the PFAS, are we seeing it all across the state? Are we seeing it in areas that are industrial and also not industrial? So we have money to do, coincidentally, 40 private wells in 84 towns where more than 60% of the residents get their water from private wells. So in this region, the central region, 15 of our 77 cities and towns qualify for that sampling. And that's available to people. It was going to expire June 30th last fiscal year, but it's been extended for a year. So we're going to be able to keep working through the program. So what we will do is select up to 40 wells. They have to be residential. It can't be a business, and you can't be a tenant. Only the property owner can sign up. And this is where we are not like the Rcap program at all with this testing. What happens is the property owner will get a kit, a lab will drive to your house and give you the kit. You have to watch a video because it's not like turning on your tap and putting the lid on the jar and putting it back in the box. For the couple days before you do the testing, you really shouldn't use certain types of deodorant. You shouldn't use a Sharpie if you're writing on the label. There is so much potential for cross-contamination that you really do need to watch this video and make sure that you're doing the sampling correctly. So you package it back up, the lab comes back, picks up the box, we send it to UMass, they send it to the labs. In 3 to 4 weeks, you get the results back. UMass sends the property owner the results, the Board of Health the results, and Massdp the results. Once the Board of Health and Massdp get them, the sampling results are public records. So again, unlike the Rcap program where there is a level of confidentiality and they're just aggregating the information, as part of this program, the information is publicly available. If someone does a public records request, we are going to have information on the website, but it's going to be aggregated. But I don't want people to think that it's completely confidential because it's not. So there are a ton of questions. We have an extensive list of questions and answers on our website. We have an extensive amount of PFAS information overall on our website, not just for private well owners who are part of our testing program, but if you have a private well and you test for PFAS yourself, or you just have questions, we have FAQs for private well owners. We have FAQs for customers of public water supplies. We have questions and answers about this program. The most frequently asked question is, what happens if I have PFAS? Typically what we do is we do a second sample. Again, that cross-contamination with so many different consumer products, we pay for that, that's free. We would do a second sample, and if it's there, over that groundwater standard under Chapter 21E, it's a reportable condition. It has to be reported to DEP, just like any other kind of groundwater contamination would be reported. We will do the reporting to ourselves. Obviously, we've done the testing and we're not going to make the homeowner go through the forms to report it. And it's not going to become what we would call a site, a 21E site, but it will be reported to 21E, and we are tracking these private well ones separately. But again, it is public information. And as I said, you are your own water supplier if you have a private well. So if you want to mitigate your exposure, you use bottled water, install treatment. As I said, there are caveats that come with the treatment. We have an FAQ about water treatment for private well owners that I really recommend that you would read. Reverse osmosis is not recommended for a bunch of complicated reasons. It does work, but basically you're taking PFAS water out of the ground and putting it back in the ground, which Massdp frowns on. So RO is not a recommended technology. If you have PFAS over 20, that's one thing, it is reportable. If you have PFAS over 90, which unfortunately we have in the area, in Hudson, in fact, we have wells that are in the hundreds. 90 parts per trillion is what we call an imminent hazard. Massdp will step in that case, and we will provide the bottled water. We'll give you a treatment system, and we'll try to figure out where it's coming from if you're in that situation of having contamination over 90 parts per trillion. So the last slide, I think. Yeah. So I know I covered a lot, but there's so much information on our website, and equally there's so much misinformation on social media and other things that you can look at. If you have questions, just Google Massdp PFAS. When you do that, this is the landing page you find, and you click on what's purple, what's highlighted there, And you can find, if you're really curious about the science and how did we get to 20 parts per trillion and what were the toxicity values you use, you can drill down and find all of that scientific information. If you want to just say, I'm a private well owner and I want to know what kind of treatment, you can find that. We have a ton of information. And if we don't have something, then you can reach out to me. Margaret knows how to reach me. She has my email address. She has my cell phone number. And if you can't find what you need on the website, we will help you find that information. We also work very closely with the Department of Public Health. They have information for healthcare providers. So if you do, as part of our program or on your own, decide to sample for PFAS and you have PFAS, you can talk to your healthcare provider. That person can talk to people at DPH to get specific information about PFAS in drinking water. That would not be DEP. And I think DPH has been a really good resource for boards of health in dealing with PFAS. So that was a lot. I am happy to come back at some other time and speak more slowly when we're ready to roll out the program in Berlin, which will be probably in a couple of months. What we try to do is 20 targeted samples and 20 random samples. It's been a little difficult in some of the towns to get people to sign up, not just because it's a scary thing to think that you might have a 21E problem, but we send out postcards. So to the low tech people, we send out the postcards and they throw them in the trash because they look like junk mail. It's like, you've been selected for a free sampling program. It's if I were at UMass and I was the contractor for this, I would not have made the postcards the way they are. So again, in my region, my 15 towns, we're actually going door to door, and in the targeted areas where we are looking around things like fire stations or someplace where there may have been a big fire where foam could have been deployed, manufacturing facilities. The one town where we have the upholstery manufacturer, it was just like, okay, 1,000 feet away is an old mill where they made water resistant upholstered furniture. That's not too hard to figure out. Landfills, different things like that. We will pick 20 targeted, and then we will look for 20 random people to try to compare that against. So we're doing a little more of a personal touch than just the postcards, because it's been difficult to get people to go to the website and sign up. We can help people. We've signed up people, our staff have signed up people right on their doorways, on their phones to sign people up who are interested. So like I said, I'll be in touch with Margaret talking about this more as we get closer to having UMass develop the maps, and then staff in the region will add on to that what we think are likely candidate areas, and come up with a list of, if we want 40, we'll probably come up with a list of about 100 to start with. And it's not necessarily first come, first serve. So we will be looking for targeted area, and then the random ones will be first come, first served. So that's it.
So we have about 7 minutes before our 8:15 hearing. Paul?
Are there PFAS associated with gas stations?
If there had been a fire, when you're at the gas station and you see the things on the ceiling, those can be foam. And if there had been a fire, that's the only instance where I'm familiar with PFAS contamination being found at gas stations is as the result of a fire.
Thank you.
Sue, Bobby, Bill, any questions, comments?
I'm assuming you'd be working with the boards of health in.
Yes, absolutely. It's been very good to partner with the boards of health. We've provided back, pre-COVID, we would come out with just a stack of our FAQs for private well owners and bring those to the Board of Health, be available to the health agent. We've been working a lot with Neshoba in the Neshoba towns. Unfortunately, some of the, Stowe has been a place where we've sampled literally hundreds of private wells because of contamination from the fire station in the center of town, very high levels. So we've worked a lot with all of the boards of health, and we have a number of people on staff, and that's part of their job, is to talk to the boards of health.
Very good.
One other question. You addressed bottled water and water suppliers. Is that testing done by you folks at the local level, or does that take place at a state level?
So
I
the,
know of a purveyor of a lot of bottled water, and they call themselves, I won't say it, but something Springs, and it comes from a well on the side of Route 140. And it just kind of makes me wonder how thorough the investigation of the bottled water industry is, just for general information.
yeah, it hasn't really been an investigation. It's been, we reached out to the bottled water companies and asked if they had tested and could they provide the information to us back in the beginning. And from that, the Department of Public Health has an initiative to work with water suppliers and to get them to sample and then to provide the results and to update the results. So we're getting the information now through the Department of Public Health, but I don't know what the frequency is of them getting updated information from the companies. I can tell you another company who has Springs in their name that may come from Maine is one of the contractors we use when we provide bottled water. So that other one is fine, at least as of today.
All right. We have about 4 more minutes. Looking at Mary. All right. Are there any other? Well, Mary, I saw you doing this, so I didn't know if you were like getting a fly or, you know.
It's a mosquito.
Okay. All right.
Sorry.
No worries. Bobby, I didn't know if you had any questions. You're on mute. If not, we can open it. We've got about 3 minutes before our next hearing. Open it up to any of the folks in the audience.
May I just ask a quick question of, oh, was that Bobby?
Yeah,
Go ahead,
Bobby.
Margaret.
Okay, I was just wondering, so because it's going to be a few months before the rollout, Mary Jude, is there something that we could actually put up on our website and out there in the public so people can at least be introduced? I did pull up the fact sheet, so we could do that, and I pulled up the quick reference guide. Is there anything else that you suggest that we put up? And
I can
post
definitely provide you with a short summary that we've had on social media. The towns have put a little blurb out. I can get you that. And if you can provide a link to our page, I think that would be helpful, not to put the burden on the town to be sort of distributing all this information, but to send people to our website and get the FAQ for private well owners, things like that. That would be great.
Okay.
Thank you for offering that.
Bobby, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, is one of the primary sources of the pits, is that like the foam or the wetter water? Is that what has caused this? Or like firefighting foam or the wetter water chemical they use? Is that what primarily has caused this?
It's in different places, the source is different. In Stowe, it's been traced to the fire station in the center of town. In other communities, it's been manufacturing. Around Devons, it's Devons. So it's different in different places.
I think we lost Bobby. I'm not sure if he's on the Cape and just has bad service.
On the island.
Nice. Okay. All right. Well, Mary Jude, Jim, thank you. And Mr. Brookings, thank you so much for coming. Very much appreciate you being here. Looking forward to working with you in the future. Margaret, thank you for all your help. Please let us know how we can, continue to push the information out for both programs.
Thank you. I appreciate your help with this.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Thank
Thanks,
you, Mary
everyone.
Jude. Talk to you
Have
both.
a
Very
good night.
informative.
Thank you. Take care.
Good night.
All right, so we're right at 8:15. I know that there are a number of folks in the audience. Is Stephen Acasa here? I'm looking if anybody sees them. All right.
We've got Brian Clark here, who is, I think the site manager. Sorry, Brian, I don't know what your formal title is, but don't know if he's serving as the spokesman tonight for the applicant.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm here.
So Brian, are you representing Mr. Benacasa?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So at 8:15, we're having a public hearing of the board sitting as Berlin Earthworks Board. The applicant is Steve Benacasa or Brian Clark stepping in his place. Owner development homes at Highland Ridge, located off of Highland Street in Berlin and on the assessor's map. We also have members from our Earthworks Board that are also in the audience. So Margaret, I know that you had provided a lot of guidance and questions that we need to ask Mr. Clark, and it looks like somebody else was promoted for that. Do you want to launch into that? Do you want Brian to give an overview of what's going on so that expectations are kind of like set? You're shaking your head. Yep. All right. So
I think
Brian,
an introduction would be appropriate, yeah.
okay. All right. So Brian, over to you.
Okay. Yeah, we just we're applying for this permit. You know, we need to get material on site. There's a list of material. I think you guys all have that list of material or that we need. I don't know if you guys have it or not.
Yes, Brian, that was in the notice.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, we just need to haul in material, pretty much not hauling anything out. Everything's coming in. So we're just asking for the, you know, if you issue us the permit.
So Margaret, do you want me to go down the list of questions? Is there anybody from Earthworks that we should promote if they have additional questions to ask?
Well, the first thing, Peg, I just want to make sure you have opened the hearing.
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. So I think that the board, this is where the board would actually have first option at asking the applicant questions to better understand the project. And then you could invite public questions.
Okay. And Chris and Scott, feel free to jump in as well. So Brian, I guess one of the first questions that need to be asked, are there any materials that you're proposing to import will be like-kind soils as defined in Massachusetts Contingency Plan 310 CMR 40 dot several zeros?
No, everything is we're hauling in is processed gravel, stone, nothing from any other site or any other locations.
Will there be any temporary structures related to the importation that will need to be erected on the site? And if so, have you provided documentation of the size, on-site location, and other relevant details prior to potential permit issuance?
No, there is no temporary structures, no.
Let's see. So in terms of hours and trucking operations, we're assuming that you will start no earlier rather than 7 a.m. and finish no later than 5 p.m. With the trucks going up and down Carter and or on Highland Street. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that no trucks will be allowed to idle and or wait in queue in the village center or in the town at any time, also
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
And that you will adhere to a 15-mile-per-hour limit going up Carter onto Highland Street?
Yes.
Right. Are those the only trucking routes that you'll be taking is through Carter and Highland? Will you be coming
Yes.
in through Bolton?
Right. That'd be everything's coming up Highland from Canada to Highland.
All right. Let's see. Margaret, there anything? So there is, so we require a performance bond.
Well, the board may impose a condition that requires a performance bond
Okay.
for the for the term of the importation, and that would be to cover any damage to townways or anything like that. I would suggest that if the board does choose to require a performance bond, that the building commissioner be consulted regarding the amount.
Okay. All right. So it says, Brian, that we also need to require all of the following information in accordance with any and all approved permits, state, local regulations, directives of our building commissioner, planning board, conservation, and board of health, including a distance of on-site earth import activity from street and lot lines, steepness of slopes, excavations reestablishing to grade, disposition of tree stumps and boulders, loaming and plant of the area to suitable cover, and placement of any temporary or permanent drainage. Do you have any comments, questions, need clarification on any of that?
No, I don't have anything for that right now. So what the first thing says, distance from street to lot lines?
Distance of on-site earth import activity from street and lot lines.
Okay, I mean, that should all be on the site plan that we
So,
sent in.
yep,
would
so, and excuse me, I talked to the chair of the Earthwork Advisory Committee earlier today, and he also mentioned the same thing. So we may want to just request a copy of the site plan if we haven't already received that. Now, Brian, did you submit that with your application?
I did, I think.
Okay.
I forget how many copies, it was a few. I think it was 7 or 9 copies or something we submitted,
Okay,
but yes, we did.
all right.
And we will also have periodic inspections that'll be conducted by the building commissioner and the Earthwork Advisory Committee designee for the Earthwork Board.
Okay.
So, let's see. So there is a comment about a conservation restriction that is still outstanding, and it must be resolved to the satisfaction of the Conservation Commission. So I was wondering if you've been in touch with them, have a spot on an upcoming agenda to talk to them about this?
We're working on that. We don't have it yet, but we are working on that, yes.
And Dan,
Okay.
if I could,
Mhm.
Peg,
Absolutely.
there was also, and this is also a Conservation Commission issue, not Earthwork Board, but
Mhm.
the board was also notified of the something about silt in the lower basin and trying to work with Concom to resolve that. So Brian, you're probably aware of that as well?
Yeah,
Okay.
yes.
So, let's see, per the bylaw, all conditions imposed by Earthworks Board will be documented in writing and on the permit at the time of issuance, where the date and the expiration date will be also recorded on the permit. Are there any other questions from the board that, oh, there you go, Scott.
Brian, do you have a sense of when you would be done importing things? Like, is there an end date for this?
It's hard to say. It depends on the sales. Obviously, if we don't get any sales, we'll slow down. But if we can keep going the way we're going, I would say 18 months to 2 years.
Okay.
So this will have
Because
to be renewed.
I might be looking for, yeah, I was gonna say, because this has to be renewed annually anyway, right?
Yes.
So we've seen a couple of these having some of these rules and regulations in place that just go on forever. And I'd like to be able to a point where we could say enough, at least for a bit. Okay, if it's annual renewal, that will be fine.
Chris, did you have a question?
No, I was just saying that the license needs to be, or the permit needs to be renewed every year.
Yes. I already have it on my phone in an alarm.
Go ahead, Margaret. It looks like you want to say something.
Well, it's probably not contributing much to the conversation, but I just wanted to, for the public that is in attendance here and for those who might watch later, I just wanted to kind of restate the reasons why the board conducts these hearings and can impose permit conditions. The bylaw specifically says this can be done or is done to protect the groundwater supply, health, welfare, convenience, and safety of the public, and to promote the best interest of the neighborhood and town. So it goes just beyond the dirt itself or the materials coming in. It's actually taking into account the consideration of the neighborhood and the town as a whole. So I just wanted to restate that for everyone's information.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Margaret, should we open it up to any of the members on the Earthworks board that are in the audience that have questions?
If the board is all set with their questions, sure.
Chris, Scott, you good?
Mhm.
Okay. All right, Mike, let's see, Mike's up, Bobby's up. Paul's still here? Yep, there he is. Welcome back. Nice to see you. So are there any questions, comments that you would like to pose to Brian on behalf of the Earthworks board? Paul, Mike, Bobby, anybody?
Bobby, you would be using no engine brakes coming down through there, Brian, on Carter Street?
I'm sorry, you really broke up. I couldn't understand what you said.
I think they agreed not to use engine brakes and exhaust brakes coming down through
You're right.
Carterville and stuff
You're right.
Mhm.
Yes,
They are.
yes, correct.
for the convenience of the neighborhood.
Yes,
So no
Thank
Jake
you.
breaks.
yes.
Right.
Paul, you're on mute. Paul, you're on mute. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, much better.
Okay, small point, Brian, but you agreed to the 15 miles an hour going up Carter Street and Highland. I just want to make sure that's true in the reverse direction, which I think is a little more tenuous because trucks are now empty and they're rolling downhill.
Yes, it's, 15 miles an hour.
Both ways.
Both ways, yes.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate the catch. Mike, any questions from your side? It's a very funky camera angle that you have. I'm trying to figure out what it is. I'm not quite sure.
We can't
know.
figure it out either. I don't know why it's doing that, so.
That's all right.
Am I on now, Peg?
Yeah, Mike, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, Paul, my question would be to you. When we talked about the 15-mile-an-hour speed limit, did we talk about that from the center, when you turn on at the center on the Carter Street through Carterville, but then at the railroad tracks, it could be a little faster uphill and coming down? I think it was from the railroad tracks to, just past 19 Carter to where you would stop. Am I right in saying that, or was it the whole way up to the hill?
My recollection was the whole way up, but I must admit, I don't have notes that support that.
Yeah, I thought when we talked about it, it was 15 miles an hour, just past Mary Porter's house at where the tracks start. From there down to the center, maybe coming down the hill and up the hill, you could bump it to 20, but I don't know, maybe that wasn't the case. That's how I remember it. But because that's a 30 from the railroad tracks up to the entrance is 30 miles an hour, I think.
Correct, right.
So, we bumped the through Carterville down 5 miles an hour. So if we bumped the hill down 5 or 10 miles an hour, that would be 20 miles an hour allowed on the hill.
My only concern with that would be what what, if any, kind of noise is going to occur when when the trucks have to, let's say, gear down, slow down from the 20 to the 15 in front of those houses prior to reaching the railroad tracks on the downhill.
Well, they're not allowed to use Jake brakes.
Okay, just,
So it would be, you know, just slowing down. I mean, Brian, is Andy on with you?
Andy was supposed to be on. I'm not sure if he is or not.
I mean, we could make it 15 the whole way. I mean, I'm not against that. Are you, can you live with that, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. If that's what it is. That's what it is.
Well, why don't we go with 15 then, and that'll do the neighbors more of a favor.
I think it also keeps it simpler too. It's
Yeah.
straightforward. Just one
No.
number to deal with, not two.
Yep, you're right.
So Margaret, given that, is there any way that we could get the, our infamous blinky sign back up there somewhere to reinforce, and then also talk to Chief Galvin to make sure that that area has at times some police presence, maybe first thing in the morning and towards the end of the afternoon, to make sure that the miles per hour is enforced?
Yes, we can arrange both.
Okay. Mike, any other questions that you might have?
No, I think you covered them all, Peg, when you were asking Brian about this stuff.
Okay. Just taking a few notes.
Michael, or Chairman,
Go ahead, Bob.
did loom get included on that list of materials coming in? I saw there was a question about whether looms.
I believe
added
it
to that
did, but
list of importation. Okay.
So
I believe it.
Yeah, I think Bob's question was, do we include loom? Loom or loam, however you say it.
Loam, same
Loam.
thing, yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
If it's not, it needs to be, because they need to bring in loom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if it got on.
Oh, Bobby, we got to get you better reception, or you got to come home.
Yeah, I'm down the island and I'm working off this little Wi-Fi box. So I'm sorry.
No worries, no worries. We got you. Absolutely.
Can I ask Brian, so because loam isn't included here, what is the volume of loam that's going to be brought in? So we can put it on the permit,
Hang on, I thought I had it on.
roughly?
No, give me 1 second. Oh, are we still here?
Yes.
Okay, my screen just went out. Okay, we have on this one here, we have 16,000 yards. Did you get that?
Yes.
Yeah.
And would hydro seeding be called an importation, or is that just seeding?
That's not an
No,
earth
that-
material.
No.
Right.
Well,
Great.
it's planted an
Turns
earth
into one.
material, but.
Turns into one. There you go.
Hmm.
All right.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions by Earthworks or the Select Board?
I'm good.
Got it covered.
Margaret, do we open it up to the public?
Yes, yeah, that would be great. If anybody has a question or comment, now's the time.
Yep, so please raise your hand and this way we can promote you. Oh, it looks like somebody's hand went up. Mary, I'm gonna guess that's Mary Porter.
Right.
Mary Porter?
Audible, Peg?
Yes, can hear you. Much better than Bobby. You're all good to go.
Right here in Berlin. I'm just a little distance away. Wi-Fi is working. It's good. So I had several things I wanted to comment about, but I had two questions for Brian Clark.
Okay.
Yeah, and so the first question is, where is Stephen Benincasa tonight?
He's at another meeting in another
Oh, he's
town.
here. He's here.
Oh,
He is
he's
here.
on?
He just joined the audience.
All right. Okay.
Okay.
And
he's
then if you know, Brian, what's going on with the tree cutting last week? What's the purpose of that?
We were just pulling out dead wood that was lying around the project.
You cut a huge amount, right adjacent to the Lowe's property.
Yes, there's another pond going down there.
Well, that's a
Retention pond.
okay. So could we have that detail? That's a pond now, not just taking vegetation out. It's a pond you're building.
Yes, retention pond. Yes.
And is that on the conservation restriction area?
No, I believe not. No,
What parcel is it on?
it's on our parcel.
Yeah.
Parcel 27.
Well, is it part B, C, D? What part is it?
I'm not sure of that.
Yeah, okay, so I'm suggesting that maybe it is on conservation restriction, but I don't know. You guys are in control of the information. And I don't believe that our Conservation Commission was notified ahead of that activity. So that's just the questions. Let me turn to my comments about this. And I'm going to ask the select board to deny this permit tonight, and I'll address why in a few minutes. I'd also ask the select board to require a performance bond in an amount sufficient to mitigate the existing and future damages to the abutters in the town center of Berlin. And also ask the select board to fine the Benincasa operation under section 7 of our bylaw for failure to comply with our bylaw, and to calculate that fine on a daily basis for the period of unpermitted operations. And beyond the earthworks, I'd ask the select board under the powers granted by the Berlin zoning and other bylaws, and as a condition, if you decide to grant this permit as a condition to permitting further construction, to review the Highland Ridge plans and for compliance with senior overlay zoning districts and any other applicable Berlin bylaws, and to conduct regular audits of the construction activities and communicate the findings of those audits to the public. And also to require Highland Ridge to conduct studies of public safety, groundwater, and natural resource impacts on the town and its citizens, including the future residents of Highland Ridge. And let me pause and tell you why I'm asking for that. The history of Mr. Benincasa's irresponsible and callous disregard for the town, its citizens, the abutters and residents, and the people involved in the project. The failure to obtain earthworks permit, leaving your subcontractor, Mr. Russo, unable to meet scheduled work obligations. The traffic hazards. We've been living through hell in the center of town for a year and a half. The only construction vehicles related to this project that obeyed speed limits were the Russo trucks. Everybody else has violated speed limits. We have children. We have a pedestrian who has very limited vision that walks this street. We have cyclists. We have human beings living in the center of town, and their safety has been ignored. A year and a half. It's been horrendous. And the unsafe conditions have persisted to this very day. Further, I understand that there was destruction of stone structures that are believed to be prehistoric Native American burial structures after the work site foreman was alerted to their presence on the parcel. And there has been unsightly clear cutting of trees visible from Highland Street, destroying existing wildlife corridors and all mature trees on the building plane itself. So the shade and passive cooling and natural beauty that should have been there for future residents has been destroyed. And last but not least, there's been protracted delays in finalizing the conservation restriction terms. And there's no reason for that. They need to be finalized. And so the final piece of my rationale for asking the select board to take whatever action it can here to get the attention of this developer is the density proposed for the top of that hill is way too high for the site and for the surrounding land character and uses, especially for groundwater resources. And the Berlin Conservation Order of Conditions, the findings included, particularly included significant Wetlands Protection Act considerations in the area of private water supply and groundwater supply, along with storm damage, pollution, and wildlife habitat preservation. So the two wells situated in the bottom third of the hill to service this development are tapping the same water table that all of the abutters wells are tapping. And we need to know what the impact is going to be. And not just for the people who presently live in Berlin, but for people who might be choosing to buy a unit in Highland Ridge. Are they going to have water? We need to have these questions answered. So thank you very much for your attention. And I do hope the select board that you can give whatever consideration you can give to my comments. I genuinely appreciate. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Mary. Thank you so much for your input. Is there anybody else from the audience who might have a question or comment for Steve and or Brian? Oh. No? All right, I'm not seeing any. All right. Okay, I guess there are, there you go, Walter Muddy.
Unmute. Okay, can you hear me?
Absolutely.
All right. I guess my simple question is, thank you, Mary, for what you shared there, all that's going on in back of your place there. But what options or what can we do about the trucks that we see going way above the speed limits by our houses? I live at 63 Carter Street, and they're coming down off the hill. I understand that. And I'm thankful that they're not going to use their Jake brakes, or I appreciate that. It's miserable to listen to those things. And I think 7 o'clock in the morning is too early, but that's my own personal opinion. But anyway, you know, I know that this has to go on, and that's part of the project and all that. But what options do we have if we see these trucks, or the contractors that are going in, you know, after the guys who are doing the blue boarding, the guys who are doing the roofs, the guys who are doing all the other equipment? Are they all going to be warned of the same speed limits, or what options do we have? I guess that's my question, and I don't know who to address that to.
Well, I could offer something that the bylaw does. Mary noted that the bylaw does allow fines to be imposed if the board was to grant a permit with specific conditions and those conditions were violated. The board has designated the building commissioner as its agent for investigations on earthwork activities. And so the building commissioner could actually have the authority to impose non-criminal citations or fines for violations of the permit and its conditions.
Brian, were you going to say something?
I was going to say that I was talking to our subs, and I talked to all our subs and tell them to keep the speed limit down, because I know we have a problem with it. So I make sure when I talk to the guys, I let them know to keep the speed limit down, going down Highland. So yes, I do talk to them about this because it is an issue.
Walter, are there any follow-up questions?
Somebody else is trying to talk.
Traffic, Steve Benincasa.
Okay, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, if the gentleman that lives at 63 Carter Street sees someone speeding, he can report to the police department, also can report it to us, and we can both take action, but we need to know specifically who the perpetrator is. We can't just know generalities, someone speeding, because We don't know if it's someone that works for us or it's just someone passing through. It's not even related to the project. So we want to get along with the people in the town and we want to comply. And so there were a lot of generalities that were mentioned. If there's specific items that we're not adhering to in this development, we will address them.
I have a question for Steve. Steve, do you know if the tree removal was done inside the conservation restriction area?
I believe it is, but I'm not prepared to answer that. I thought this was just, I didn't realize that we were going to be, speaking on this topic. So I did know, but I can't speak to it
Okay,
100% right now. So I can look that up and I can get back to someone tomorrow.
That
to let
is,
you know.
it's true.
But,
This
I
is,
know that this is the area that we don't do any more clearing than we have to do. So I can tell you that this was on the plans that were approved and we're building it as per the plans. We did not go in there and cut any trees that were outside the work area. This is all on the plan, on the approved plans that we're working under.
all right, thank you. And Steve does have a valid point that is not an earthwork matter. It was a question that came up during the hearing though, and I just wanted clarification. Thank you.
I had one more question for the full board.
Sure, go ahead, Bob. Yep.
Is your plan including any bituminous hot top and concrete coming in as materials so we don't get caught up when it's time to pave?
I don't know who that question's for.
Probably Steve or Brian.
Or Michael.
I don't believe
anybody
that, I don't believe that concrete and hot top fall into the earth import bylaw.
Okay, great.
And I would like to comment on Mary's comments. Some of your comments, Mary, I agree with you to a certain degree on, but a lot of your concerns, I don't think have to do with the earth import bylaw. They are concerns that should have been spoken or asked about during the planning board stages on some of the things you're talking about before the project was even approved.
Yep. Mary, you have your hand back up?
Yes, thank you. Mike, a good point. I understand what you're saying, and I don't disagree with you. The reason I raise those things is I'm seeing an attitude by this developer towards the town that is played out by his failure to get an earthworks permit. Complete failure, just ignore it. And so you're correct that some of these concerns, I'm late coming into the game on it, but it remains a concern. And I think the town needs to look at the realities of these things. So what I raise, even if maybe it should have come up on the planning board stage and it didn't, it's still, we're in an execution stage on a development project. And if these major concerns come up and we just ignore them, where do we land? And so I'm asking the board, to the extent that it has the ability to mitigate and to modify what we're looking at, to please do so. And if it's out of their power, fine, I understand that. But I'm particularly concerned about the density of the development, given the traffic situation, the water resources, and the attitude of this developer. And it plays out, Mike, it's playing out in this earthworks permit context because of the total failure to pay attention to it. And this is an experienced developer. How is it that you don't know what the town bylaws ask you to do? And so maybe people need to take a look at the senior overlay district zoning and what does it actually mean? And is what's being proposed, does it fit that zoning bylaw? Take a look at it. I don't think that's happened. I don't think the rigor has been brought into this project, nor the respect that is owed to the town of Berlin. So Mike, you're right. You're right. This is not, I'm off the topic of earthworks, but this is the first time that members of the public have had a chance to speak about it. And we've been living a year and a half of hell in the center of town. So here we are.
Thank you.
Well,
Go ahead,
I'm
Mike.
not trying to side with anybody here, but Berlin is the only town that has a bylaw like this to be renewed and gone to. So I don't know if he didn't pay attention to that enough or what. But I do see your concern.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Mike. Anna, you have your hand up in the audience. And you're still on mute. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Absolutely. Good evening, Anna.
Good evening. So I'd like to circle back to the trucks. As somebody who works from home and has been experiencing these trucks going up and down the hill now for months, my general estimation is that we have already seen the number of trucks and the volume of materials go up the hill to the site as the permit is saying that we've only seen half the materials. And so I was just curious if there was any way of verifying that the materials that have already been delivered are in reality only half the actual materials, or if they're, as to my estimation, the double what the applicant is saying that they have already put on site.
So Steve or Brian, can you respond?
Yeah, I mean, how do you know it's only half the material? I mean,
Your application says that you've only put half your material on site.
yeah, I
My
was just wondering.
calculations are you've already put 100% of what you're asking for on site.
No, we have not.
Yes, is there any way of verifying that, please?
Well, I don't know how you're calculating it.
By counting trucks.
Okay. I can look into it.
That would be great. I would assume there are bills of lading.
Yeah. I'll look into it and let you know.
Okay, Anna, before I let Paul speak, are there any other questions that you'd like to follow up with?
Nope, that was my question. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Anna. Have a great night. Mr. Paul.
On the permit, I take it that there is cubic yardage figures of various materials to come into the site. It's really a mathematical calculation that might be helpful in terms of, I'll say, prognosticating how much more truck traffic we're going to see. If a truck hauls 15 yards and there's 16,000 yards coming in, the math is pretty simple. It would be nice if somebody took a look at that in the permit to give us some kind of idea, to give the neighbors and the residents some kind of idea of what's going to happen over the next 18 to 24 months.
Brian, go ahead, Scott.
And this permit is again only for the earthworks importation. And so in theory, I believe there could be other trucks that bring other information in as well.
Absolutely.
So that even if we counted the number of trucks, and there was the number of trucks, let's say this permit is good for another 200 trucks, there could still be more than 200 trucks that go up and down that road because there would be trucks that are hauling other materials in and out.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I mean, a triaxle or a trailer dump is a little different from a van or a straight truck. That's the differentiation.
Other trucks that aren't even coming to our project that go up and down that road also.
Those are fairly easily identifiable because I followed a couple.
Okay.
Brian, do you have a timeline when you could possibly get that information back to the board?
Yeah, I should be able to do something pretty quick within the end of the week, I guess. Yeah.
Couple days.
Yeah. Yes.
Is Andy on the phone on the Zoom? Andy Russo?
He was supposed to be, but I haven't heard from him.
No, I don't see him.
In the audience.
Peg, could I add one thing to that?
Sure.
Scott, I think were you trying to say more like cement mixers and stuff like that, that are big trucks?
Yeah, or asphalt or.
Yeah, and there's, you know, pouring floors, foundations, you're gonna have a lot of trucks coming up there that have nothing to do with this earthworks permit. And another thing, just coinciding with you, Anna, would be a lot of these figures are based on estimates too, and there's never a job around that goes exactly to the amount of yardage that's figured. A lot of times it runs over on that too. It's called losing your shirt and all that kind of stuff. That's another thing that, you know, I'm not trying to side with either side here, but I know how a lot of this works too. So
Mike, are there any other questions from anyone in the audience before we close the hearing? Oh, Mr. Paul, you're back up again.
Just to clarify, I'm just trying to put a general sense for the neighbors about what is to come. I understand Scott's point, but we do have some fairly, you know, some numbers that which are estimates. So the number of trucks would be estimated. I'm not saying this is empirical science and we're going to dot I's and cross T's, but I think the neighbors should have some idea of what's coming down the road. I don't think that's unreasonable.
I can say that we're going to be in construction for the next couple of years, that we're building according to an approved site plan. So we're not going to deviate from the approved site plan. We're not going any further, any less or any more than the approved site plan. So whatever it takes to complete that site according to the approved plan is what we plan on importing.
Thank you, Steve. Yep,
So we have
Mary
an
is here.
approved plan. You could.
No, go ahead, Steve. I'm sorry.
So again, we're building according to an approved plan. We're not bringing any more material, nor any less material than we need to complete the plan as designed and as approved.
June Miller, I see that you have your hand up. Nice to talk. I would say see you, but nice to talk to you. Go ahead.
I wanted to know if Brian could comment on the proposed native monuments that were destroyed.
I'm not even sure about anything about those.
We've seen no evidence of any native artifacts. We've seen no evidence at all.
Is it possible that you were notified by an abutter that there were such monuments there?
I was never notified, no.
No.
And I see that you have your hand up. So if you want to unmute and go ahead.
Meeting. Hello again. So two statements. My first is to apologize. I didn't mean to create confusion about future numbers of trucks going up the road, although that would be lovely to know. I certainly wouldn't expect a project of this size to be able to truly delineate that. My concern was more how much material has already been brought to the site, and the idea that potentially it's been more than they're suggesting it has been, and just verifying that actual number. Secondarily, I was the abutter that I suggested to both the site foreman as well as calling Russo and leaving a voicemail on Andy Russo's voicemail about the potential of indigenous structures on the site. There were 4 on the site. 1 is outside of the construction boundary. 2 were destroyed just recently after I walked the site several times with the site foreman. And then 1 was buried under dirt by the septic system during the original earth moving phase. So those sites did exist, and I did inform multiple people about them.
Thank you, Anna. June, do you have any follow-up questions on that?
No, not now.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to pose a question to Steve and or Brian? All right, not seeing any. Chris? Okay, so Margaret, is this where we close the hearing and then we as a board deliberate?
If there are no additional comments, with respect to the indigenous structures, I will follow up with Anna on that and see if we can speak to the proper state agency that would oversee that.
Okay. All right, so I'll make one last call for any more public questions. Seeing any hands go up, so we will close the public hearing. On that, I appreciate, oh, Barbara Huntley just got in under the bell. Barbara, if you want to unmute. There you go.
I'm just wondering if anybody has photographs of those indigenous those 4 indigenous structures, yeah. If somebody had photographs of it, it would be very helpful. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. All right, so Margaret, Anna, I'm assuming that that's something that you can look into. Is there a hand up? No, that's Barbara's hand. All right, so last call. All right, we're good. So we will close the public hearing. Again, thank you for your input. Very much appreciate you being here. So I will open it back up to the board for any type of deliberation comments. Margaret, is that the process? Yep. Okay. All right. Scott, Chris?
It's a lot of information to take in. I think we just need to remember that it's an earthworks hearing, and how we feel about that particular part of the hearing. And maybe Margaret, can you go over some of the requirements that we've talked about in the past?
Okay, so there was Peg mentioned early in the hearing, restricting trucking activity to no earlier than 7 a.m. or later than 5 p.m. and that would be weekdays on Carter and or Highland Streets. No trucks allowed to idle and or wait in a queue in the village center or on any town way at any time. A 15-mile-an-hour speed limit both ways, up the hill and down the hill, on Highland Street, onto Carter. No Jake breaks. Let's see. The trucking routes were mentioned earlier. The trucking would only be, I believe, through the center of town, so Carter and Highland only. And let's see. Performance bond. This is where I suggested, I know Mary mentioned this in her statements too. I suggested that the performance bond be in an amount determined by the building commissioner. So I would like to refer to him and ask him for his input on that. And that all of the following be required in accordance with all approved permits, local and state regulations and directives of the Building Commissioner, Planning Board, Conservation Commission, and Board of Health. And that includes the site plan, because a number of these things are on the site plan. The distance of on-site import activity from street and lot lines, the steepness of slopes, excavations, and reestablishing to grade, the disposition of tree stumps and boulders, loaming and planting of the area to suitable cover, and placement of any temporary or permanent drainage. And then finally, that periodic inspections will be conducted by the building commissioner and or earthwork advisory committee designee for the earthwork board.
And
I
Margaret,
think-
don't forget the conservation restriction that's still outstanding.
Yeah, the conservation restriction, except that is not an
Yeah,
earth
an earthwork.
importation.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's been discussed, but it's not part of the earthwork permit itself.
So the importing of earthworks is not relevant to conservation in this town?
Oh, no, it is. It's just not
So
an earth, it's not an earth material. It's not where you're
So we-
ruling on the importation of earth materials, not on the conservation restriction.
Right, but we can't make the importation contingent on having conservation sign off on other things.
Oh, you could ask, oh, I do have it here. You could ask it to be resolved to the satisfaction of the Conservation Commission.
Right.
But I did note that I don't believe it can be a condition of this permit. However, it's board's prerogative if you want to note that as well.
And then I think Paul had the right idea of if we can get a sense of about the number of trucks, knowing that it's the sort of a ballpark of the number of trucks we're expecting in the coming year.
I don't know. Can you
Yes.
make that, can you make that that wouldn't be one of the requirements, but it would be nice to know. Is that what you're saying?
So we're talking about earthworks imports, knowing the number of trucks they're going to import earth on, I think can fall in the purview of the earthworks committee. Or not earthworks, sorry, whatever the select board is part of.
The number of trucks, okay?
Right.
And again, I get that it's a ballpark, but I think it gives us a sense of where this is at.
Right, and Brian had promised to get back to us either at the end of the week or within the next couple of days on what has already been hauled to the site for earthwork material.
And then there's a cease and desist in place at the moment, isn't there?
Yes, until this.
And
until-
there's some concerns that cease and desist might have some negative impacts, and that because they've not been able to import some stuff, there's some erosion and other problems that could be occurring on the site.
Yes.
Is there a way that we can, there's not a way to give some limited permissions to allow the stabilization of what is there and limit the remaining damage that happens because of, guess what, July has been rainy, without sort of approving the entire permit, is there?
Well, I believe that we did that with the Russo trucks, correct?
Okay.
The Russo trucks can haul in there themselves at the moment.
Okay.
Correct, there were 5 items that Russo will add loom to that, but there are 5 items that they are only allowed to truck up to the site.
Okay, thank you.
So, any additional comments, questions from the board? All right, I take that as a no. So I guess it's time for a motion. Do we want to allow this or not?
Sorry, I'm looking over my notes.
I know I'm going back and forth between the screen over there and my notes over here, so I apologize for the ping ponging back and forth. So is there any motion to be made on the Highland Ridge earthwork permit?
Scott, are you privy to making a motion or no?
I'd be more comfortable with the motion if I knew I could get conservation sign off as part of it. And I don't know how to word that piece of it, that I believe that the importation of soil could have some impacts on the conservation of lands in the area. And I don't know all the conservation related issues, but I'd hate to have I hate to limit what conservation will be able to do or preserve because things have already happened by the time they get to trying to get to an agreement.
If they are working off of a plan that was approved, would conservation have already seen this? Perhaps, and the confusing part is for some people that perhaps they don't know that there was another builder that was the one who probably got the plan approved. I mean, not everybody may know that. And now it's in this developer has taken it over. So
may I speak on that, Chairman?
Sure, go ahead, Bob. Maybe. Bob.
Pat.
Bob, I'm gonna have to cut you off. You're coming in and out, unfortunately.
There is a conservation monitor on that job right now, Conservation Commissioner Pat Gardner.
Okay.
That's all.
Thank you, Bob. Thanks for getting that out.
At least somehow that sentence made it all the way through.
Yeah, there you go. You have enough bandwidth to get that out.
So Scott, I'm just gonna put this out there for the board's consideration. The permit, if issued, is good for 1 year. This conservation restriction has been going back and forth for a long time. In fact, it predates COVID. I remember it distinctly when we started. So would the board like to set a timeline, you know, as part of the permit? I'm still not, well, would the board like to set a timeline in which the conservation restriction must be resolved to the satisfaction of the Conservation Commission? I mean, would you consider doing something like that?
I would.
I would too.
Sure.
So then, I know Conservation just had a meeting last week. So this week, no, next week, they're on. I think they're first and third Mondays of the month, I think. So Steve and or Brian, thank you. Is it possible to get on agenda for conservation?
Can I ask, so I was trying to figure out during this whole meeting what we were referring about the conservation, and are you sure that the conservation restriction is not done yet? Is that what you're saying? Because I thought that was completed.
I don't believe it's complete yet.
I don't think it
It's
is.
not completed?
I don't believe it's
I know there
complete
was some delay in having the engineers locate the trail system, and then we hired them to do the trail system, and then there was a disconnect. They had completed it. We didn't realize they had completed it. By the time we circled back to figure out we had, then the attorney was working on it again. So I really, as of late, I thought this was completed. So this is not something we've ignored. This is something that we worked with multiple parties on. There's many parties that we have to check with and adhere to. So it's not something I can just do on my own. So we have worked with this. My attorney's been working this diligently. So I don't know what one has to do with the other, but we are going to comply with all the rules and regulations, not just the conservation, not just earth removal. We have a number of different departments we have to comply with. So I don't know where we're going with this conservation. Again, I thought it was completed. If it's not completed, it's very close to being completed. If it's not, and I will check with that tomorrow. I was unprepared to answer about conservation restriction. I didn't realize that that was going to be a topic of tonight's meeting. I apologize for that.
Mary, do you remember? Do you remember whether did things go through your office and were they completed?
I don't think so.
The Conservation Commission, I can mention that as of last week, the Conservation Commission was in communication with our town council on it. So it's not closed. I can't tell you how close it is to resolution, but it's not closed yet.
Okay, well, I'll follow up on that tomorrow.
Since this is sort of a recorded meeting, we have sort of Steve saying he's working on other people. Maybe I'm not as concerned about it as I was earlier to hear that there is momentum behind it and people still working on it. And the RO notes do say there's a limit to what we could do to with an earthworks permit related to conservation.
But, you know, as I look at this, Scott, the board can require that where I have a bulleted list of all those items that must be in accordance with local permits and approvals and regulations. You could certainly include, you know, in accordance with, you know, rules pertaining to conservation restrictions. So it could be, you know, encompassed under there, I think, with the other things.
Well, Margaret, and we still need to figure out the performance bond, correct? We're gonna need,
big
open
yes,
question.
I need to consult with Richard on that one.
Right, it's right, because Rich is going to help set what he thinks is the appropriate amount. We might see, because if Richard's looking specifically at damage to town related stuff, Mary pointed out sort of potentially damage to abutters, which, you know, could happen. A bulldozer goes places it's not supposed to go, or other pieces like that. And so I think we might want to make sure it's an appropriate for damage to town or abutters.
I could say that, you know, all the trucks are insured, we're insured, we have general liability. There's insurance that does cover all those items already, with or without earth removal bond. We're covered under that area for damage.
Paul, you had a question?
Just a comment relative to the possible performance bond. Most of the roads in this town are constructed for residential traffic, and a large amount of truck traffic may or may not have any impact on our local roads, particularly Carter and Highland. And I just think that people should be aware of that. Oftentimes you'll pull up to an intersection and you'll see the asphalt rippled, and that's due to heavy truck traffic and high heat temperatures. So all I'm raising is suggesting that that's a future question mark that should be in the back of people's minds.
Thank you, I appreciate that. So Scott or Chris, do we have a motion either way, either to grant the permit, not grant the permit, or grant it with restrictions?
I would make a motion to approve the permit with the restrictions that we have just gone over, that Margaret's read and we've added to.
I am fine seconding it.
May I just add that the loam totaling 16,000 yards would also have to be specified on the permit.
Okay.
All right.
Fine with that.
Any other comments, questions from the board? All right. Go ahead, Scott.
Mary had some comments that were sort of out of the scope of this that I think we should sort of think about more. The ones for me, just because they're for me, we should have another place where we could think about if there's things we should be looking at that are other concerns that are not related to earthworks.
Yes, I agree with you, Scott.
All right, so we have a motion and a second to allow the permit to go through with the restrictions on the performance bond, and for Brian or Steve to get back to us for the bills of lading to show what has gone already up the street, and also for, oh God, there was one more. Oh, the conservation, a timeline on that for the restriction, for it to be completed by legal and then back to the lawyer representing the development. Did I get that correct?
Plus
Yes.
the bulleted list of conditions that were read.
All right.
Yes.
Okay, time for a vote. I'm gonna go last because I haven't made up my mind yet.
Okay, I will say Keefe, aye.
Hawkins, aye.
Stone, no. So, but it passes 2-1. Okay, next steps, Margaret?
Next steps, we start drafting the permit. It's not going to be able to be issued right away because I do have to consult with Richard on the performance bond. The board did not set a timeline on the conservation restriction in your vote. So I'm going to follow up with a conservation restriction. May I have authority from the board to impose a timeline based on the feedback I get from conservation and our town council?
I'm fine with it.
Okay. There is progress being made. I just can't tell you when it's going to be done.
Chris and Scott, you fine with it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Margaret. Appreciate you jumping in and taking care of that. All right. Well, I think that is it for this evening. We do not have a need to go into executive session. So I will entertain a motion to close our meeting.
So moved.
Second,
All right, no further questions. Put it to a vote. Stone, aye.
Hawkins, aye.
Keefe, aye.
All right, thank you all very much. Appreciate you being here. Stay
Thank you.
dry.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good
Thanks,
night.
Good
everyone,
evening.
for coming.